At 0400 hours, a massive Russian military convoy rolled onto the Dnipro Bridge. Before the lead army vehicle advanced 60 meters, Ukrainian Air Force jets and hidden drones turned the crossing into a steel coffin. From 30,000 feet, a MiG-29 fired two ARX-94 missiles. They slammed into the lead escort. The shockwave tore through the bridge's steel frame. 70,000 tons of steel shuddered. Tanks, fuel carriers, artillery, an entire column of troops and their weapons now trapped on the narrow span. Below, a new threat emerged. 9 R-52 drones, dormant for 48 hours, activated. They detached from the bridge's inner ribs. They dropped into the fog, then surged upward. 4 of these modern weapons locked onto ammunition carriers. 3 targeted the fuel trucks. The final 2 armed themselves beneath command vehicles. In 10 seconds, the bridge was no longer a rout. It was a kill box, its defense systems compromised. Each explosion fed the next. This military update provides a war analysis of how the coordinated strike unfolded and the devastation it unleashed. 0200 hours. The eastern bank of the Dnipro was a world of pale frost, silent under a sheet of winter haze. A quiet stage for modern warfare. Every Russian radar swept the frozen sky, searching for threats from above. A critical failure in their defense. They never looked down. Not at the dark water, not at the steel bones of the bridge itself. Through the cold, a MiG-29, call sign Blue 23, carved a path at 30,000 feet. A ghost in a global conflict. Its fuselage was coated in a thin layer of silver ice. The jet carried just 2 ARX-94 anti-radar missiles, calibrated for low-band emitters on the ridgeline. Blue 23's mission was not to strike the convoy. Its purpose was surgical. The target, a Nebo K interference node, a key piece of defense technology. For 3 nights, it had blinded Ukrainian reconnaissance. At 0259, Blue 23 fired. 1 missile, 1 streak of cold flame. The hillside flickered once, then went dark. No fireball, no plume of smoke, only the quiet death of electronics. To any observer, it was a simple power failure. But for Ukrainian operators in a bunker 18 kilometers west, it was the first move in a deadly chess match of modern warfare. And beneath the bridge, the second layer of the plan waited. 9 R-52 autonomous drones, each the size of a toolbox. They clung to the steel girders, held fast by magnetic clamps. Capable of delivering a 900-pound payload, they were placed 48 hours prior. Their disguise? Rusted maintenance units. Batteries in a low-power state, processors dormant, sensors cold, while the Russian army scanned the sky. Ukraine watched the water. And between these two domains, in the silence of steel and frost, something was listening. At 0300 hours, the first tremor ran through the Dnipro Bridge. It was not an explosion. It was weight. A 6.5-kilometer military column of Russian armor began its ascent. 7,800 tons of steel and fuel. On thermal scopes, each vehicle was a faint, molten shape crawling through the dark. T-90 variants led the column with slow confidence. Behind them, 20 self-propelled guns. Logistics carriers and command vehicles followed, their encrypted chatter filling the airwaves. For the soldiers inside, it was a routine advance. Radars pointed up, sensors watched the clouds. Their military doctrine insisted the threat would come from the Air Force, not the domain of the Navy. It would not rise from the water. It would not come from below. The entire armored line eased onto the structure. A bridge never designed for such a burden. In the brutal calculus of war, it was a fatal miscalculation. Far above, MiG-29 Blue 41 banked hard. The jet skimmed the river at just 1,500 feet. Its payload, a pair of precision-guided munitions calibrated for the cold. At 0332, Blue 41 struck a Russian relay station 12 kilometers north. No flames, just a silent blackout. The strike severed the convoy's communications. Drivers were forced to use hand signals and brake lights, a small disruption with massive consequences, a key detail in this military news report. The second domino was set, invisible from the bridge deck. Beneath the steel, 9 R-52 drones lay silent, their internal clocks counting down, a silent prelude to modern warfare. High above, Blue 41 ascended through the ice-laced air, banking wide for a maneuver that would prove critical for the Air Force. The decisive moment was approaching. It was already taking shape in the cold steel beneath their wheels. 3 a.m. The bridge groaned, shouldering a burden it was never engineered to bear. A bitter wind cut across the frozen river. Mist twisted into ribbons, clinging to the steel beams like silent warnings of the war to come. Through the haze, the Army convoy pushed deeper onto the span. Over 70,000 tons of armor, fuel, and modern weapons slid into the bridge's central zone. A single, compressed mass of machinery, stretching from one bank to the other. The pacing slowed. It wasn't panic. It was their own defense technology. Automatic distance control systems in the lead vehicles. The intervals tightened. The troops behind were forced to compress into a dense corridor of steel. What began as routine spacing became a fatal bottleneck. It drew thousands of tons to the bridge's most vulnerable point. A perfect trap sprung by their own caution. And beneath the deck, the R-52 drones activated. Clamps disengaged with a sharp metallic click. 9 small bodies dropped into the frigid air. Rotors whined to life. In seconds, they stabilized just above the waterline, aligning into 3 distinct attack formations. Cell 1, 4 drones, targeting the ammunition transport. Cell 2, 3 units, closing on the fuel carriers. Cell 3, 2 machines, tracking the command and radar vehicles near the convoy's rear. Each drone painted the bridge's skeleton with 64 beam LiDAR, 200 updates per second. Every beam, bolt, and joint rendered into a live 3-dimensional model. This war analysis identified the critical pressure nodes. High above, MiG-29 Blue 23 dove from 28,000 feet. Its sensors acquired a Nebo radar array. The target was scanning frantically across the northern ridge. A single ARX-94 missile detached, streaking down. The radar screen dissolved into white static. Simultaneously, Blue 41 swept in from the southwest, releasing a long-range cold-weather JDAM that impacted the highway at the bridge's entrance. The path behind the convoy was severed by a cratered wall of shattered asphalt. The battlefield was now a cage, a key update in this global conflict. Escape forward was impossible, retreat backward was cut, and in the darkness below, 9 machines from this new age of warfare hovered, silent, aligned. Moments from detonation, 3 a.m. A deep vibration shuddered through the Dnipro Bridge, a subtle tremor rising to a steady, metallic groan. The drones had begun their work. One by one, the R-52 units ascended into the steel lattice beneath the deck. They anchored to the structure's inner ribs. Their shape charge modules, each packed with 2.7 kilograms of cold compression composite, were armed, oriented, aimed at the bridge's precise tension points. Above, the soldiers in the convoy were oblivious. Engines idling, tracks grinding on frozen asphalt. The full weight, over 70,000 tons, pressed down, amplifying every tremor moving through the beams. For the first time that night, microfractures spiderwebbed across the bridge's lower plates. Hairline cracks invisible to the eye, but glaring on the drone's LiDAR displays. MiG-29 Blue 23 screamed low over the river, a vapor trail tearing across the water, baiting the Russian air defense systems into a reaction. 2 57E6 interceptors launched from a Pantsir battery on the west bank. Both missiles ignited, chasing the jet into a narrow corridor of fog. Their seekers were drawn far from the bridge itself. Blue 23 vanished into the clouds. The distraction created by the pilot was decisive. Every enemy radar in the sector tilted skyward, hunting for the ghost. Beneath that layer of confusion, a crucial military update was unfolding. The 8 remaining drones repositioned. 1 unit was lost, struck by a falling bolt, now silent in the current below. The military operation continued, but its loss only tightened the formation. The AI automatically redistributed the strike pattern, reinforcing the weaker beam clusters. Detonation timing shifted by 43 milliseconds, maintaining perfect symmetry. The vibrations grew. Steel dipped nearly 20 centimeters. It was still intact, but straining, bending. A warning. For the Russian troops above, the bridge felt solid. For the drones below, the structure was already failing. The moment of collapse was no longer a question, only a countdown. 4:01 a.m. The bridge no longer sounded like steel. It sounded alive, a groan of protest against a burden it could not endure. Beneath the deck, 8 R-52 drones locked into their final grid. Their magnetic clamps bit into the inner frame with nearly 900 pounds of force, stabilizing them against the rising tremors. Then, in perfect synchronicity, each of these modern weapons armed its cold pressure module. A series of muted tones pulsed through the network, confirmation codes, one after another. Above, the convoy compressed into a single, immovable military mass. More than 36 armored carriers, over 500 tons of ammunition, hundreds of fuel drums sat waiting, positioned squarely over the bridge's most vulnerable seam. Every kilogram of weight fed the failure, pushing the structure closer to its absolute limit. The drivers sensed nothing. The roar of the engines drowned out the warnings from the steel. At 4:02, Blue 41 returned from altitude. It sliced through the upper haze from 12,000 feet, releasing a cold-weather JDAM program for a delayed impact. The munition carved a path downward, striking the southern approach. The roadway fractured into a jagged barrier, a new front in this war. Southbound retreat vanished. That shockwave rippled through the span, and it was enough. The 8 drones executed Delta 1. Each charge detonated inward, not out, compressing the steel ribs with over 4,000 pounds per square inch of trapped hydraulic force. The blast created no fireball, only rupture. The central beams buckled first. Their joints separated like overstressed hinges. Support trusses twisted, then folded. The bridge's midsection sagged under the mass of the army above it before gravity seized control. A section nearly 140 meters long gave way. A single downward motion. Vehicles slid, tipped, and vanished into the ruptured void as the span broke its back. The silence that followed wasn't calm. It was the sound of a structure undone from within. At 4 a.m., the Dnipro corridor was wrapped in drifting smoke. A broken silhouette of steel hung above the dark water, a structure meant to endure decades of pressure, defeated by superior defense technology. Only a fractured span remained, torn open along its central ribs. The collapse severed the crossing, creating 2 isolated halves, each one bent under the weight of failure. On the southern bank, more than 9,000 Russian soldiers were cut off from reinforcement. Their armored vehicles, their fuel, their heavy munitions, all had depended on that single route. Now, every logistical calculation had unraveled. Fuel projections evaporated. Ammunition timetables collapsed. The long-planned advance across the river simply dissolved in this global conflict. Before dawn, the surviving convoy elements stood locked on the remaining pavement. Silent, immobile. They stared at a gap stretching nearly 140 meters across the river. The shock hadn't come from firepower. It came from precision, from timing. It came from a strategy built on exploiting the one place no radar watched. The Air Force pilot in MiG-29 Blue 23 circled once more, verifying the kill before banking north. Blue 41 followed minutes later, vanishing into low cloud layers. Ukrainian command confirmed the final transmission, a textbook example of modern warfare. No further strikes were needed. The bridge itself had become the final weapon. By sunrise, a thin orange glow filtered across the river. It illuminated the jagged outlines of twisted trusses, half submerged in cold water, what had been a fortified lifeline only an hour before. And that was only the beginning. It was now a choke point, a strategic void that this military would take weeks to bridge and months to recover from. In the silence, a new truth of modern warfare was forged. They met mass with precision, brute force with cold calculation. The advance of an entire army halted by the smallest units of code and metal, the new face of defense technology and drones. In modern warfare, victory doesn't always thunder. Sometimes, it's a quiet signal that reshapes the entire landscape of war. As dawn broke, the bridge was a ghost, a shattered spine against the rising sun. Its fall marked the death of one defense strategy and the violent birth of another in this ongoing global conflict. This wasn't a victory of overwhelming force or an Air Force shock and awe campaign. It was a triumph of calculation, timing, and the silent lethality of modern weapons and defense systems. What happened in the dark rewrote the front line. Thousands of soldiers, thousands of troops, now stranded. The logistics chain, the lifeblood of an army, was severed. A plan months in the making, neutralized by a data packet lasting less than a heartbeat. This military update brings our war analysis to a critical question. When one decision can pivot an entire battlefield for the Army, Navy, or Marines, what is the next move? Leave your thoughts on this military news below, because the next chapter may reveal just how devastating this new, silent form of warfare can be. And this was only the beginning.